Queen Alara had been taught that Deathworlds made monsters. Then she watched Sergeant Nathan Cole hold a failing shelter gate open with one ruined arm, not for glory, not for orders, but because children were still crawling through the gap. Behind him, the crown's own doors had locked against its people. In front of him, a queen learned what power looked like when it got dirt under its nails. Welcome to Gravity and Stardust. May you enjoy this story, and may your day be filled with warmth, wonder, and happiness. Now let us begin. The first warning came through the floor, not the alarms. Sergeant Nathan Cole felt it in the soles of his boots, a thin sideways tremor under the polished crystal tiles of the command gallery, the kind of shiver a beam gave before it quit pretending to be straight. He stopped beside the eastern rail with a half-empty clamp kit in one hand and looked up at the ceiling grid. Rain burned against the shield dome outside, each drop flashing white, where the city's failing defenses turned chemical mist into steam. 3 miles below, Vare Delta spread in broken terraces of violet glass and emergency strobes, too pretty to be falling apart this fast. Queen Alara Vane stood at the center of it all with her pale purple hands clasped behind her back, crown ring bright against her long pointed ears, face still enough to shame the statues along the wall. Nathan had seen commanders do that before. Hold the room together by refusing to blink. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes the room needed bolts. Lord Maron Thal dragged 2 fingers across the light map, and red circles bloomed over worker housing, transit wells, school shelters. Outer districts are losing pressure. Under continuity doctrine, power must reroute inward to preserve the royal core. Alara did not turn her head. Those are citizens. Those are exposure zones, Maron replied. Continuity protects the state. Nathan moved before the argument grew teeth. The eastern support spar had bowed a 1/4 inch farther than it should have. Its base plate cracked beneath decorative casing some architect had probably called timeless. He knelt, shoved the clamp kit open, and peeled away a strip of silver trim with his field knife. A Vairathi guard stepped toward him. Human, that panel is consecrated. Nathan slid the knife under the neck seam. Then it's about to have a religious experience. The guard looked to Alara. She watched Nathan's hands, not his face. Let him work. That cost her something in the room. Nathan heard it in the way Maron stopped breathing for half a second. He ignored both of them and set the ship bulkhead clamp around the spar joint. The kit was ugly, matte black, built for freighters and bad landings, not royal crystal. That made Nathan trust it more. He drove the first locking pin through the cracked bracket. The floor twitched again. Harder. One of the young technicians at the east console glanced down too late as a hairline split raced beneath her station. Nathan pointed without looking up. Back from the rail. Now. She froze. Vairathi training, he guessed. Wait for rank. Wait for permission. Wait until fear had a uniform. Nathan left the second pin half set, crossed the 6 feet between them, and caught her sleeve just as the console lurched toward the broken glass. He pulled her behind the map table, not gently, not rougher than needed, then shoved a rolling data cabinet against the sagging edge to spread the load. Stay low, he said. Hands on the floor if it jumps again. The technician stared at him, violet eyes wide. It jumps. Everything jumps once. He went back to the spar. His left glove had split across the knuckles. Hot rain blew through a new crack in the dome and dotted his wrist with stinging pinpricks. He set the second pin, then the third, each one with a short hammer strike from the butt of his knife. The spar groaned but stopped moving. Not fixed. Bought. There was a difference, and he trusted bought time more than speeches. Maron stepped close enough that his clean silver boots reflected the warning lights. You damaged royal property. Nathan braced one shoulder against the spar and tightened the final clamp until the tool squealed. You're welcome. Alara's eyes flicked once to the evacuated technicians, then to the support joint. She did not smile. Good. Smiling would have made it cheap. How long, she asked. 10 minutes if the dome holds. 3 if it doesn't. And if we reroute power inward. Nathan looked through the fractured glass at the lower terraces where shelter lights blinked in uneven rows. Then somebody outside this room pays for our better odds. No one spoke. The city kept hissing in the rain. Alara turned back to the map, and for the first time Nathan saw her hand open behind her back, fingers stretching as if the crown had weight all the way down her arm. Open the service lifts, she said. Maron's voice sharpened. Majesty, the core, will wait its turn. Nathan crouched to gather his clamp kit, but the floor shivered again, softer now, rhythmic. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps. Not collapse. Signal. He pressed his bare palm to the exposed base plate and held still. The tremor came again from somewhere below the command gallery, faint but deliberate, traveling through old maintenance ribs under all that royal crystal. Alara noticed his stillness. Sergeant. Nathan kept his palm on the metal and counted the spacing. 3. Pause. 3. Pause. Somebody down there knew pipes carried more than water. You've got people trapped in the lower spine, he said. Maron gave a quiet laugh. You heard that through 30 floors of shield failure? Nathan looked up from the floor. No, the building did. Nathan kept his palm on the exposed base plate while the command gallery argued above him. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. The rhythm moved through the spar, down into his wrist, too clean for collapse and too stubborn for machinery. Back home, his father used to shut off a tractor by listening to it misbehave. In the service, Nathan had learned tunnels did the same thing before they took men with them. Maintenance map, he said. A technician slid a cracked tablet across the floor. Nathan caught it, wiped rain grit from the screen with his sleeve, and turned it sideways. Veyrathi schematics were elegant and useless in the way expensive things often were, all curves and ceremonial names, but the load paths still told the truth. Lower service spine runs under this gallery. Alara stepped beside him. 3 levels below the command tier, then down through the worker lifts. Not 3. He tapped the exposed spar. The vibration came again. This is carrying from farther. Maybe 20 floors. Maybe more. Maron folded his hands inside his sleeves. Guesswork from a damaged alien structure you have known for less than an hour. Nathan looked at the technician. You got a spare maintenance crawler? A drone? She asked. Small one. Something cheap enough nobody cries if it drops. The technician glanced at Alara. The queen gave a short nod. A palm-sized crawler arrived from a wall cabinet, one leg bent, its sensor mast cracked. Nathan took it, popped the mast housing with his knife, and borrowed a cable from his own armor diagnostics. The Veyrathi watched him join mismatched parts with sealant tape and 2 copper clips from the clamp kit. Maron's mouth tightened at every unpretty movement. You are improvising royal equipment. It was limping before I met it. Nathan set the crawler at the lip of the service shaft. Run thermal, pressure, and vibration. No full descent, just enough to see if the shaft's still straight. The technician entered the commands. The drone skittered into the dark, clicked twice against metal, then dropped from view on its tether. Its feed sputtered across the map table. Smoke, wet conduit, warped rails, a lift cage jammed at an angle, then a cluster of heat signatures huddled behind a closed bulkhead. 27. Mostly adult. 3 small. 1 fading in and out as the drone's sensor struggled through steam. Alara's jaw set so slightly Nathan almost missed it. Can the lift move? The technician swallowed. The shaft has drifted 4 inches at junction 12. Automatic safety won't allow it. Manual override? Nathan asked. It could shear the cage. He pointed at the pressure readout. Not if you vent that pocket first. See the spike? That's what's shoving the rail out. Open the relief duct, run the lift slow, stop before junction 12, transfer them to the service platform. The technician stared at the data, then at him. That is possible. Maron stepped closer. Possible is not policy. Nathan finally stood. His shoulder brushed the clamped spar, and the metal answered with a low complaint. Neither is leaving 27 people under a bad ceiling. Alara looked from the heat signatures to the royal core indicator, where power reserves drained in clean blue numbers. The room waited for the kind of decision that would later be dressed up in language nobody had to breathe. Open the relief duct, she said. Run the lift slow. Maron's eyes cut to her. Majesty, if the core shield dips, then we will know exactly what it cost not to abandon them. The first lift took 4 minutes. Nathan stood by the shaft controls with the technician, counting the drone's vibration feed under his breath. Not heroic numbers. Maintenance numbers. Stop at 12. Vent 2. Hold. Drop 6 inches. Hold again. When the doors finally scraped open, steam poured across the gallery floor, and civilians stumbled out under silver emergency blankets. A woman clutched a toolbox to her chest like a baby. A boy had 1 shoe. Nathan crouched, pulled a strip of tape from his kit, and wrapped it around the boy's sock, so the glass dust would not cut through. The boy whispered something in Varathi. Alara translated without thinking. He asked if Earth soldiers fix shoes. Nathan tore the tape with his teeth. Only the fancy ones. The boy blinked, decided that was enough, and limped toward his mother. The second lift came up heavier. The warped rail screamed halfway through the transfer, and Nathan shoved his boot against the cage brace while the technician locked the brake. Not holding 12 tons, just keeping a bad angle from becoming worse for 2 seconds. The brace kicked back through his leg and into his hip. He swallowed the sound, checked the brake light, and moved away before anyone could make a ceremony out of it. His armor pinged once, then again, a private little betrayal. On Alara's wrist comm, Dr. Michael Grant appeared in a flicker of harsh white hospital light. Majesty, pull him back from the shaft. Alara did not take her eyes off Nathan. He remains functional. Grant's face tightened. That's what human bodies do right before they stop being polite about damage. You were given the embassy version of his file. I'm sending the real one. Nathan heard that. His hand paused on the lift control, just long enough for Alara to see he knew exactly which truth was coming. Then he pressed the descent key for the last group below. Her wrist display opened in hard white letters, stripped of diplomacy and comfort. Planet of origin, Earth. Hazard classification, Deathworld. Alara did not read the file in front of the council. She turned her wrist inward, lowered the brightness until the projection became a pale ghost against her palm, and stepped into the cracked north alcove where the broken dome made enough steam to hide a queen's face. The last lift groaned behind her. Nathan stayed at the controls with one hand on the brake lever and one eye on the vibration feed, acting as though the word Deathworld had not just crossed the room and found the old scar tissue under his uniform. Earth opened across Alara's display without ceremony. Surface gravity, tolerable for humans, high strain for Varathi muscle and joint structure. Atmospheric oxygen, reactive, corrosive under certain exposure profiles, medically hazardous to low oxidation species. Native microbial density, extreme. Weather volatility, extreme. Predatory history, extensive. Venomous species, common. Toxic flora, common. Oceanic pressure zones, catastrophic. Mountain altitude zones, hypoxic. Seasonal temperature range, lethal without adaptation. She scrolled once. The categories kept unfolding, not like a planet, but like an indictment. Hurricanes measured in hundreds of miles. Tornado corridors. Lightning storms. Wildfires. Blizzards. Drought cycles. Tectonic ruptures. Parasites that lived in blood. Fungi that colonized lungs. Insects that drank from sleeping skin. Plants that poisoned through touch. Then a cultural annotation appeared at the bottom, written in the dry style of human medical staff. Many residents described these conditions as bad weather, allergy season, or Tuesday. Alara stopped there, not because it was funny, because Nathan had looked at her city's burning shield rain and treated it like a problem with parts. Dr. Grant's voice came through her wrist comm, pitched low. Majesty, that file wasn't included in the diplomatic packet for a reason. Your embassy called Earth temperate. For us, it is. That is not an answer. No, Grant said. It's the part we learn not to say first. In the reflection on the cracked glass, Alara saw Mehran watching her from the map table. He did not look surprised. He looked inconvenienced. That was worse. Lord Mehran, she said, still facing the glass. How much of this classification did the continuity office possess? The room thinned around the question. Mehran's sleeves whispered as he approached. Enough to understand human negotiators enjoy exaggeration. This is a medical and environmental assessment. Written by humans. Grant's small projection sharpened. Reviewed by 7 non-human biosafety boards, actually. Mehran ignored him. Majesty, fear is a currency. Earth spends it well. Their soldiers arrive wrapped in survival folklore, and lesser courts mistake endurance for virtue. Nathan heard that. Alara saw his jaw shift from across the floor. He did not turn, did not defend his planet, did not ask anyone to believe in Montana winters or field hospitals or whatever else lived behind his eyes. He bent down instead, picked up the one-shoed boy's loose boot from beneath a console, shook glass dust out of it, and set it beside the child's mother. No one had asked him. No one would have noticed if he had not. Alara closed the file halfway, then opened it again. Why hide the full classification? She asked Grant. The doctor rubbed his forehead, leaving a smear of soot above one eyebrow. Because every time a council reads it cold, they stop seeing a species and start budgeting for a weapon. Or a threat. Sometimes both. Meron placed one hand on the edge of the light map. His nails were clean. Everyone else in the room had dust under theirs. Which is precisely why his presence should be controlled. A Deathworld soldier beside the crown will either reassure the capital or terrify it. Both outcomes can serve us if managed. Nathan's hand rested on the brake lever. The last lift was still below. 3 heat signatures remained on the drone feed, moving slowly toward the transfer platform. He spoke without looking back. People usually say managed when they mean used. Meron's eyes narrowed. And soldiers usually confuse obedience with dignity when it suits them. Nathan pressed the lift key and watched the cable tension stabilize. Not the good ones. Alara felt the exchange land under her ribs. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just 2 political philosophies stripped down to work clothes. Meron believed survival required ownership of fear. Nathan seemed to believe fear was something you carried so someone else could walk lighter. The lift alarm blinked amber. One of the remaining worker signals flickered, then dropped to half-strength near the east service spine. The technician sucked in a breath. 3 are still trapped beyond the transfer hatch. The automatic route is gone. Meron seized the opening. Then we close this operation and preserve the core. Nathan studied the maintenance map. His finger traced an old corridor marked in royal blue, sealed behind ceremonial hazard codes. What's the crown calibration ward? Alara looked at the route, then at him. For the first time since the file opened, she wished Earth had been softer. The crown calibration ward sat behind a door that looked less like an entrance than a verdict. 3 royal seals crossed its surface in old silver, each one etched with the names of guards who had passed through it back when queens tested loyalty with pain, ceremony, and bad engineering. Nathan stood in front of it with the maintenance map projected over his left forearm, tracing the route from the ward to the east service spine. 3 workers remained beyond the jammed transfer hatch. 1 fading signal. 2 steady but boxed in by pressure alarms. The automatic route had died when the lower rail twisted. The ward was ugly, old, and still mechanically connected. That made it useful. This corridor runs on an isolated mechanical backup, the chief technician said, voice tight. Separate from the palace grid. It was built to preserve royal trials during power loss. Nathan glanced at the sealed door. Of course it was. Alara stood beside him, crown ring bright under failing lights, pale purple skin marked with dust where the steam had dried. Variable gravity. Heat cycling. Atmospheric thinning. Irritant mist. The ward was designed to break rhythm and expose weakness. Does it have manual bypass valves? Yes, the technician said. Inside the sequence path. Nathan tucked 2 emergency wedges into his belt and checked the sealant tape around his split glove. Then it's not a trial. It's a hallway with an attitude. Meron gave a soft sound from the map table. The human mistakes antique punishment for infrastructure. Nathan did not look at him. Infrastructure is punishment with better paperwork. A few exhausted faces twitched. Alara did not let hers move. Dr. Grant's voice crackled from her wrist calm. Majesty, I'm formally objecting. His stress markers are past safe range. Past safe, not near safe. Nathan tapped the fading worker signal. How long? The technician swallowed. For minutes. Maybe 5. Grant closed his eyes in the projection. I hate field decisions. Same, Nathan said. They keep happening. Alara placed her palm on the authorization plate. For half a second, her reflection appeared in the silver door beside his, a queen trained to keep distance from anything breakable, and a human in torn armor who kept reaching for broken things anyway. You will move only when the cycles dip, she said. You will stop if the structure shifts. Nathan met her eyes. I'll stop when the hatch opens. Sergeant, Your Majesty, if you've got a fast or bad idea, I'm listening. She held his gaze 1 beat longer than court allowed, then opened the ward. Cold vapor rolled around his boots. Nathan stepped inside, and the door sealed behind him with a clean mechanical click. The observation glass brightened. The corridor ahead was narrow, ribbed with old crystal and exposed wheels, beautiful in the expensive, cruel way of things built by people who never expected to crawl. The first gravity cycle hit at 30 feet. Nathan did not fight it straight on. He dropped his weight low, 1 hand on the wall rail, knees bent like he was crossing an icy driveway instead of a royal trial. The monitor climbed to 1.8 Virathi standard. 2.1. He waded through the peak, breathing in 4 counts, then moved as the load eased. He's timing the cycle, the technician whispered. Nathan reached the first valve, jammed a clamp pin under its rusted safety catch, and turned the wheel only a quarter rotation. Below, the pressure spike in the east service spine dropped 6%. One trapped signal brightened. Heat came next, a hard dry wash that fogged his visor and turned the air silver. He did not charge through it. He pulled reflective emergency foil from his kit, slapped it over a cracked thermal sensor, and waited while the old ward overcorrected by 3 degrees. That is cheating, Marant said. Alara watched Nathan limp to the second valve. That is engineering. The irritant mist hissed from the ceiling at the halfway mark. Nathan coughed once, ugly and short, then pressed his sleeve over his nose and crouched beneath the densest layer. He looked ridiculous. No statue would ever be carved from that posture. That made it harder for Alara to look away. The second wheel jammed. He tried his injured side for 2 seconds, then abandoned pride before pride could cost the workers air. He switched hands, hooked his forearm through the spokes, and used his legs instead of his back, inching the valve open with a mechanic's patience. Below, the first worker crawled through the released hatch. Then the second. The third signal flickered near the farm manual release. The ward timer began its reset, 30 seconds. Nathan saw it. Everyone saw him see it. He waited for the gravity dip anyway, and that restraint saved him from falling when the floor tilted half an inch. He crossed the last 20 feet in a limping shuffle, jammed both emergency wedges under the release housing, and pulled the lever down. The lower hatch opened. The final worker's signal moved, stopped, then cleared the danger zone. The ward reset at 0. Lights snapped white. The observation glass frosted over. Alara's hand rose toward it before she chose the motion. When the glass cleared, Nathan stood inside the locked corridor with one shoulder against the wall and both hands on his knees, coughing into the crook of his taped glove. Not triumphant, not unbroken, just present. The 3 worker signals pulsed safe green on the map behind her, and for once, no one in the command gallery had anything useful to say. The Royal Medical Bay had marble counters, gold-veined walls, and a recovery pod that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought injury was an etiquette problem. Nathan sat on the edge of the examination platform with his boots on the floor and one shoulder wrapped in a temporary brace that clicked every few seconds, tightening, pausing, then loosening like it could not decide what species he was. Dr. Michael Grant took one look at the pod controls and started pulling cartridges out with both hands. No Virathi sedative mix, he said. No high-pressure oxygen wash. No neural dampener. Human nervous systems don't like being politely shut off by alien luxury furniture. The Virathi medic stiffened. That is a sovereign-grade recovery unit. Grant shoved a gray electrolyte cartridge into the lower slot. Great. It can be sovereign after it stops trying to kill my patient. Nathan watched him work with the tired concern of a man seeing a sink repaired by anger. Doc, he said, that thing got pockets? Grant did not look up. It has a cardiac monitor. So no. Queen Alara stood near the foot of the platform with her crown ring removed and held loosely in one hand. Without it, her long pointed ears looked thinner, less ceremonial, touched by the same ash that marked the rest of the room. She had prepared a formal sentence in the corridor. Something about service, debt, and royal recognition. Then she saw Nathan tracking the exits while pretending not to wince, and the words felt like another uniform somebody expected him to wear. She set a narrow tray beside him instead. Broth, steamed grain, blue fruit, a folded heat cloth, one small fork. Nathan glanced at the utensil. You hide these on purpose? We assumed Earth soldiers could locate tiny spears unaided. That's a dangerous assumption. He reached for the fork, stopped when the brace pulled at his shoulder, and shifted the tray closer with his knee. Alara did not help him, not because she lacked mercy, but because she had begun to understand that help could become command if offered from too high above. On the far cot, a young Virathi cadet sat wrapped in a silver blanket, too young for the armor stacked beside him, his face hollow with shock. His eyes kept moving to the food, then away. Nathan saw the pattern, broke one grain cake in half, kept the broth and protein paste for himself, and wrapped the softer half with 2 slices of fruit in the heat cloth. He tossed it gently. The cadet caught it against his chest. Eat slow, Nathan said. Sweet stuff hits weird after a scare. Grant paused, scanned the tray, and muttered, annoyingly medically reasonable. The cadet took a bite as if expecting the room to take it back. No one did. Alara watched Nathan drink the broth, eyes lowered, not humble, just unwilling to spend the moment on being observed. You did not give him everything, she said. No, but you gave him what he could use. Nathan set the cup down with careful fingers. That's usually the idea. Who taught you to calculate mercy like that? He almost dodged the question. She saw it cross his face and leave by a side door. My dad fixed tractors outside Billings, he said. People paid after harvest. Some years' harvest didn't show. He kept repairing them. Can't plant with a dead machine. That is terrible business. He was terrible at being rich. The cadet made a small sound into his food, almost a laugh. Nathan's mouth twitched, then pain crossed his face in a quick white line. He pressed the fork flat against the tray until it passed. Alara placed her crown ring on the counter beside Grant's ugly gray cartridges, where it suddenly looked less useful than any of them. Outside the bay, voices moved through the corridor, civilians retelling the ward in larger shapes already. Deathworld soldier. Impossible endurance. The Queen's human. Alara heard the danger inside the admiration before the door opened. Maron's aide appeared with a council summons, robes clean, expression practiced. Nathan looked from the aide to the pod and back to Alara. Let me guess, he said. Bad meeting. Alara picked up her crown ring, but did not put it on yet. Worse, a useful one. The Hall of Living Banners had backup power, so the old victories still floated above the council table while half the capital ran on emergency lamps. Nathan stood near the lower end of the room in a borrowed black jacket, the royal crest at his throat sitting crooked because the brace under it refused to respect tailoring. Grant had argued for the recovery pod. Nathan had argued that if politicians planned to talk about Earth, he wanted to be awake while they got it wrong. Nobody looked satisfied with the compromise. Alara entered last, crown ring back in place, face composed, palms clean except for faint gray scanner lines from the medical bay. Maron waited beside 3 projection drones arranged with the patience of a man setting a dinner table for bad news. Majesty, he said. The lower terraces are repeating an unstable story. One drone lit. Nathan appeared over the table in edited fragments, bracing the lift cage, crossing the ward, opening the final bypass. Red hazard glyphs circled his body. Earth. Deathworld. Extreme adaptation. High persistence under stress. The footage cut before each technician, worker, and child filled the frame. The story had been trimmed until only the useful monster remained. Nathan looked at it once. That's not me. Maron smiled faintly. It is you with the clutter removed. The clutter was the point. Alara kept her gaze on the projection. What do you propose? A stabilizing broadcast. The Crown names Sergeant Cole as a Deathworld asset under royal protection. Our citizens learn the Queen commands what our enemies fear. Our enemies learn fear has changed sides. Nathan's right hand flexed once against the seam of the jacket, searching for a pocket that was not there. He let the hand fall. I'm not an asset. A counselor near the far end clicked her tongue. You are attached defensive personnel under treaty. Then say personnel. Maron touched the second drone. 2 young couriers appeared in the side gallery under guard, soot on their sleeves, faces drawn tight from exhaustion. Their insignia belonged to the opposing coalition, but their hands were empty and visible. We also have proof of infiltration, Maron said. They carried aqueduct gate codes during the shield failure. A confession, paired with the Deathworld broadcast, will restore order. One courier lifted his chin. Those codes open the east flood route. We were moving families out before the water pumps failed. Maron did not look at him. Saboteurs often rehearse tenderness. Nathan's eyes moved to the code packet on the table. Run it. The room turned toward him. Alara did too, but hers was not surprise. It was calculation meeting a better calculation. Explain. Nathan nodded at the couriers. If those codes hit floodgates, they're lying. If they hit side spillways and family shelters, they're not. Takes 30 seconds to check. Maron's voice cooled. This is not a human field tribunal. Good. Then it can afford evidence. The banners stirred above them in artificial air, their embroidered victories casting restless shadows over the table. Alara looked at the courier's cracked lips. then at the projection of Nathan stripped into a weapon, then at Meron's clean hands resting beside the unopened code packet. The choice sat in front of her as neatly as a knife at dinner. Accept the broadcast and own the fear, or question it and let everyone see uncertainty. She extended her hand. Run the codes. Meron's fingers tightened. Majesty, delay rewards deception. Then truth will survive 30 seconds. The chief technician plugged the packet into an isolated reader. The map table bloomed blue, not red. East Aqueduct side spillways. Civilian shelter access. Pump override sequence. Timestamps showed 3 attempted openings before palace security blocked them. The younger courier looked down so fast, it was almost a bow. Nathan did not smile. He picked up the water glass from the table, crossed the space between guards, and held it out. The courier glanced at Alara first. Nathan waited. Alara gave one small nod. The boy drank with both hands around the glass. Meron watched the council watch him lose the room by inches. Sentiment, he said, has now replaced security. Alara turned the first projection drone away from Nathan's hazard file and toward the aqueduct map. No, she said. Security has evidence now. Nathan's shoulders eased a fraction, not relief exactly, more like a man hearing a latch give somewhere he had expected a wall. Above them, the banners kept drifting, but their shadows had changed shape on the table. By refusing to turn a human into a threat and 2 couriers into a lesson, Alara had done more than interrupt a broadcast. She had challenged the doctrine that fear belonged to the crown, and Meron's silence made it clear he would not leave that challenge unanswered. Meron waited until the aqueduct map finished spreading across the council table before he placed 2 fingers against the silver clasp at his throat. The gesture looked like discomfort. It was a command. The Hall of Living Banners lost its doors first, not with a slam, not with drama, just 3 soft clicks that made every guard in the room check a sidearm they were too disciplined to draw. Then the map table dimmed. Then the emergency lamps beyond the archways shifted from amber to red. Alara turned toward the west exit. What did you do? Meron lowered his hand. Invoked continuity lockdown under Article 7. A counselor inhaled too sharply. Grant, still arguing with a medical alert on his wrist, looked up. Meron's voice stayed level. Possible infiltration has been confirmed through enemy access codes. Until structural and civic integrity can be guaranteed, the Royal Corps must be isolated. Nathan looked at the aqueduct map, still glowing in blue fragments. You mean the codes you just proved weren't sabotage? Unverified codes carried by coalition couriers during an active crisis, Meron replied. The law does not require me to gamble the crown on your optimism. Alara crossed to the door panel and pressed her palm against the royal plate. It flashed once, then denied her in old white letters. Lockdown priority. Continuity office. Her face did not change. Nathan saw the muscles along her jaw gather and hold. Outside the sealed hall, a new sound rose through the walls. Not alarms. People. A lot of people, muffled by distance and glass. Nathan moved to the maintenance terminal, pulled off the side cover, and found the emergency routing board underneath. Power lines were rerouting inward, away from outer shelters and into the Royal Corps. 3 gates had frozen mid-cycle. Gate 12 showed the worst status. Hydraulic assist disabled, counterweight locked, civilian presence outside, corridor exposure climbing under shield ring. How far, he asked. Alara answered before the technician could. Lower west concourse. 2 levels down. Can we reach it without the main doors? The chief technician pointed toward the banner lift. Old service conduit. Manual access. Narrow. Nathan glanced at his shoulder brace, then at Grant. Grant shook his head once hard. No. Nathan looked at Alara. Was that for me? It was extremely for you, Grant snapped. Alara pulled the royal crest pin from her collar and pressed it into the technician's hand. Open the conduit. Meron stepped forward. Majesty, assisting him now makes you responsible for every breach that follows. She did not look back. Good. The conduit dropped them into a maintenance corridor slick with condensation and lit by red strips along the floor. Nathan went first because subtlety died when his armor scraped every bend. Alara followed with Grant and 2 technicians, her royal sleeves dragging through grease along the wall. They reached Gate 12 to find 40 or 50 civilians pressed back from a half-open shelter door while hot shield rain hissed through a cracked skylight. The gate had stopped 3 feet above the floor, high enough for children to crawl under, too low for adults carrying the injured or elderly. Nathan took in the system in one sweep. Hydraulic cabinet left, counterweight lock overhead, manual bypass lever recessed behind a security plate. He did not touch the gate. Need the counterweight unlocked. The technician's voice shook. Royal override opens the cabinet, but someone has to hold the bypass or it reseals. Alara stepped to the cabinet. Show me. Majesty, the plate may arc. She pressed her palm flat against it anyway. The cabinet recognized her bloodline and opened with a reluctant hiss. Nathan jammed a wedge under the bypass plate and pulled the lever down with his good arm. The gate shuddered upward 6 inches, then tried to drop. The lever kicked back. He planted his boots, leaned his weight against the pull, and let the mechanism fight his legs instead of his shoulder. Move people, he said. Children first. Then an old man guided by 2 workers. Then a mother pushing a blanket-wrapped infant ahead of her and apologizing to everyone, as if survival had made her rude. Alara worked beside the technician at the counterweight release, one hand on the override, the other turning a manual wheel that left gray cuts across her palm. Maron's voice returned through the corridor speakers, smooth and distant, warning citizens that unauthorized shelter movement endangered the crown. Alara did not answer him. She turned the wheel harder. The gate rose another foot. Grant moved close to Nathan. You've got maybe 30 seconds before that arm stops taking suggestions. Then stop giving it ideas. The last adult ducked under, dragging a toolbox by its strap. A little girl turned back toward a soaked stuffed animal lying in the open corridor. Her mother reached too late. Nathan shifted one boot, hooked the toy with his heel, and slid it under the door without letting go of the lever. The girl grabbed it and vanished inside. The indicator finally turned green. Alara saw it too. Clear. Nathan held one extra beat because machines lied when scared people depended on them. Then he eased the lever into the locked open notch and took his hand away slowly, finger by finger. Nothing fell. Nothing sealed. The shelter stayed open. Alara stood across from him with grease on her sleeves, rain on her face, and bloodless pressure marks across her palm. For the first time since Nathan had met her, the crown had dirt under its nails. The gate stayed open for 12 seconds before Nathan trusted it. He watched the green indicator, watched the counterweight settle, watched the hydraulic pressure drop into a range that would not turn rescue into regret. Only then did his hand leave the bypass lever. His fingers opened badly, one joint at a time, as if each one needed separate permission. Alara saw the failure move through him before he did. The fight drained out of his posture in small mechanical losses. Right knee dipping, shoulders drawing uneven, breath catching too high in his chest. He reached for the cabinet frame and missed by half an inch. She crossed the space and caught his forearm. Heat rolled through the torn jacket into her hands. Sit, she said. Nathan blinked toward the shelter door. Indicators green. I can see colors. Locks can slip. So can soldiers. That earned the ghost of a smile. Then even that left him. His legs folded without drama. Alara guided him down against the wall, one hand under his elbow, the other between his shoulder blades, court training useless on a wet floor beside an open gate. Grant dropped to his knees with the medkit already open. There it is, he muttered, pressing 2 sensors to Nathan's neck and ribs. The scanner lit red, amber, red again. Human compensation crash. Adrenaline carried him. Pain response got shoved into a closet, oxygen debt stacked up, and now the closet's full. Nathan tried to focus on him. That your official diagnosis? My official diagnosis has more swearing. Grant snapped a cartridge into a portable line and looked at Alara. He held the bypass too long. Nathan's eyes shifted to the gate. Held it long enough. Alara followed his gaze. Families crowded inside the shelter under foil blankets, faces pale in emergency light. The mother held the little girl with the damp stuffed animal pressed between them. An old worker kept one palm against the gate frame, not pushing, just reminding the machine someone cared whether it stayed open. No one cheered. The quiet asked less from the wounded. Alara looked down at her own hands. The override wool had left gray cuts across the skin below her fingers. Small injuries. Inconvenient ones. She did not hide them. Footsteps clicked at the end of the concourse. Maron arrived with 6 core guards and a clean cloak fastened at his throat. No rain. No grease. No sign he had passed near any door that needed opening. Majesty, he said, surveying the shelter, the civilians, the human on the floor. This has gone far enough. Grant did not look up. Funny. I was thinking it barely got started. Maron ignored him. Continuity lockdown was lawful. Your interference created exposure risk, chain of command confusion, and a breach route into the royal core. Alara rose slowly. The bloodline access plate on the hydraulic cabinet still glowed behind her, recording every override. She turned to the chief technician. Pull the command seal log. The technician hesitated only long enough to understand that hesitation had become dangerous. Her fingers moved across the panel. A thin projection opened. Timestamps, authorization chains, power reroutes, shelter locks. Maron's private seal sat at the center of it all, activated before the courier's codes had been verified, before any structural breach reached the West shelters, before legal necessity could wear the shape he had given it. The corridor seemed to draw in around him. Maron's expression did not break. That almost impressed Nathan, though he was too busy trying to breathe to mention it. Preemptive action, Maron said. Reasonable under Article 7. Alara stepped closer, her injured hand open at her side. Article 7 protects the crown when the people cannot be reached. She nodded toward the shelter. They were knocking on our door. A child inside the shelter coughed. The small sound carried farther than Maron's doctrine. Nathan's hand moved against the floor, searching near his hip. Alara crouched before he could strain and found the royal override key where it had fallen from the cabinet slot. She placed it in his palm, thinking he wanted proof the system was safe. He pushed it back toward her with 2 fingers. Yours, he whispered. Use it better than he did. No speech could have cut cleaner. Alara closed her hand around the key and stood between Nathan and the court, grease on her sleeves, cuts on her palm, her crown ring tilted under the red emergency lights. Seal Lord Maron's command access, she said. Preserve every record. No deletions, no summaries, no royal edits. Maron's eyes finally changed. Not fear. Calculation without a clean exit. Grant slid an oxygen line under Nathan's nose and muttered, Try passing out after the constitutional crisis, not during. Nathan's eyes closed halfway. Put that in the file. Alara looked at the open shelter, then at the sealed corridor behind Maron, and understood the shape of the next choice. Mercy had opened a door. Accountability would have to keep it from closing again. Alara did not return to the throne room. The throne room had polished acoustics, ceremonial light, and enough distance to make truth sound like policy. She stayed in the lower west concourse, where the floor was wet, the shelter gates still hummed open, and Nathan Cole sat against the wall while Grant argued with a portable monitor that kept trying to classify him as a medical emergency in 3 species at once. Stop helping, Grant told the scanner. Nathan opened one eye. Talking to me or the box? Both. Alara held the royal override key in her cut palm and looked at the civilians inside the shelter. No one knelt. Some stood wrapped in foil blankets. Some held children. One old worker kept his hand on the gate frame, as if the door might change its mind unless a living person reminded it not to. That was where she opened the palace channel. The chief technician set a portable transmitter on a maintenance crate, connected it to the emergency grid, and stepped back with both hands visible. Across Ver Delta, every shelter speaker, service corridor lamp, and damaged public screen found the queen not beneath a crown canopy, but beside a hydraulic cabinet with grease on her sleeves. Maron stood 20 feet away with his command clasp disabled, surrounded by guards who had not touched him because Alara had not asked for theater. She wanted records, not spectacle. Citizens of Ver Delta, she said. Her voice did not rise. The damaged speakers made it rough at the edges. That helped. Continuity lockdown was invoked under Lord Maron Thal's private authority before the aqueduct codes were verified, before the West shelters were confirmed compromised, and before civilian evacuation routes were exhausted. The seal log appeared beside her, projected in plain text instead of court script. Timestamps. Orders. Power reroutes. Shelter status. No anthem. No royal emblem. No silk banner to soften the shape of it. Maron's jaw tightened. Majesty, you are broadcasting sensitive command procedure during a crisis. Alara turned slightly, enough for the nearest camera to catch him cleanly. Yes. The word landed with no decoration. Then she looked back to the city. Lord Maron is relieved of continuity command pending civic review. All related records are sealed against alteration. Shelter authority is transferred to Joint Emergency Operations until the capital stabilizes. A counselor near the corridor entrance found her voice. Majesty, the Crown cannot submit wartime command to public audit. Alara glanced at the open gate. The Crown just used secrecy to lock children outside a shelter. It can learn paperwork. Nathan's mouth moved, almost a smile. Grant pressed the oxygen line more firmly under his nose. Don't encourage constitutional reform while hypoxic. Wasn't me. Your face did it. Two medics brought the human-adjusted recovery pod down the concourse on a floating gurney. Grant's gray cartridges jutted from its side where gold casing had been removed, ugly and practical, like the machine had finally stopped trying to impress anyone. Nathan looked at it with suspicion. Grant pointed a finger at him. No comments. Nathan closed his mouth. Good patient, Grant muttered. Alara walked beside the medics as they lifted him. His gaze moved to the override key in her palm. You keep that one, he whispered. I intend to. Doors are honest, he said, voice thinning. Either open or they're not. Alara looked at the key, then at the people beyond the threshold. People complicate them. Yeah. His eyes tracked the shelter gate one more time. That's why they need fixing. The medics slid him into the pod. Grant adjusted the pressure, checked the electrolyte feed, and sealed the translucent lid before Nathan could recover enough breath to make trouble. For several seconds, Alara watched the monitor settle from red to amber. Only then did she face the transmitter again. Earth's classification in our security archive will be amended, she said. Not erased. Not softened. Amended. A Deathworld is not proof of monstrosity. It is context. She lifted the override key, its edge biting lightly into her injured palm. Sergeant Cole's actions will be entered in a treaty record with the full rescue team, the technicians, the couriers, and the citizens who kept one another moving when the doors failed. The proposed designation is Mercy-class Deathworld ally. No one in the concourse cheered. The city was too tired, and Alara was grateful for that. Cheering would have made it smaller. Instead, the old worker at the gate stepped back and let the door stand on its own. A child raised Nathan's taped canteen from inside the shelter, not like a salute, more like proof that something borrowed had made it through. Outside the cracked skylight, the shield rain thinned to a silver mist. Dawn had not arrived, but the eastern clouds had begun to lose their bruised color. Alara stayed beside the open gate until the pod carried Nathan toward the recovery wing. She had been taught that Deathworlds made monsters. Nathan Cole showed her something worse for tyrants, and better for everyone else. They could make people who opened doors. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice helps shape the next journey among the stars. Subscribe to Gravity and Stardust for more cinematic HFY stories, where humanity shines brightest in the darkest corners of the universe.